No towering skyscrapers have fallen. No artificial beaches have disappeared into the sea. The luxury hotels are still keeping their lights on and their lobbies polished. But the constant stream of people that once kept the Dubai machine running has faced a sudden and profound disruption. During the first quarter of 2026, Dubai International Airport recorded 18.6 million passengers. That number represents a steep drop of 20.6% compared to the same period the previous year. By March of 2026, the situation intensified dramatically. The airport handled only 2.5 million passengers, which is a staggering decline of 65.7%. These are not just empty seats on airplanes. They represent millions of planned journeys, hotel nights, and financial transactions that simply vanished into thin air. The immediate loss of flights is merely the most visible layer of the damage. The real question is, what happens to a global tourism capital after the airport gates reopen? This is a story about the fragile nature of certainty. It is an investigation into how geopolitical tension, thousands of miles away, can quietly dismantle the revenue streams of a city built for endless growth. To understand the sheer magnitude of what is currently at risk, we must first examine the immense scale of the economic machine that was operating just months prior. Throughout the entirety of 2025, this city was breaking historical records with mechanical precision. Official data from the Department of Economy and Tourism revealed that 19.59 million international overnight visitors arrived in the city. This represented a solid 5% increase compared to the previous year. Every single metric pointed towards an era of unstoppable momentum and extreme profitability. Average hotel occupancy across the entire emirate stood at an astonishing 80.7%. That percentage translates into 44.85 million occupied room nights over a 12-month period. These are not just abstract statistics on a government spreadsheet. They represent millions of physical human beings requiring daily transportation, constant air conditioning, culinary services, and premium entertainment. This immense momentum seamlessly carried over into the new year. In January 2026 alone, the city welcomed 2 million international visitors, marking another 3% increase. The system was completely optimized for endless expansion. It functioned as a fortress of logistics, specifically designed to funnel global wealth through its pristine airport terminals and directly into its vast networks of retail and hospitality. The city does not necessarily need every single passenger to fall in love with its culture. It simply requires them to keep moving through its infrastructure. Dubai is fundamentally a machine that converts human foot traffic into immediate cash flow. But when an entire economic model is predicated on the uninterrupted flow of human beings, any external force that creates friction in that flow will inevitably choke the revenue stream. The city had perfected the art of selling a promise of absolute stability in an otherwise unpredictable world. Now, that very promise is facing its ultimate test. The disruption did not begin with a localized failure within the city itself. It began with a geopolitical shock that forced an immediate redrawing of the regional map. During the initial phase of the disruption, more than 21,000 flights were suddenly canceled across major aviation hubs in the Gulf region. Airspace warnings were issued rapidly, forcing airlines to make split-second decisions about routing, safety protocols, and operational viability. We need to visualize what a canceled flight actually means for the local economy. Consider a hypothetical family flying from London to Bangkok, with a scheduled 3-day stopover in Dubai. When that specific London to Dubai segment is erased from the departure board, a massive chain reaction occurs. One empty seat on a Boeing 777 translates instantly into one hotel room that will not be used tonight. It means a restaurant table remains empty during peak dinner hours. A scheduled taxi ride never takes place. A set of tickets to a major theme park goes completely unsold. Faced with extreme airspace uncertainty, that family might decide to reroute their entire journey through a completely different global hub, bypassing the region entirely. The most terrifying aspect of this crisis is not that Dubai ceases to exist as a premier destination. The terrifying reality is that a highly profitable transaction can be erased from the local economy by someone clicking a button on a computer screen thousands of miles away. The city has spent billions constructing a fortress to protect its physical assets. However, it cannot build a wall around the airspace that connects it to the rest of the world. To truly grasp why a single canceled flight can drain revenue from across the entire city, we must look deeper into how Dubai actually extracts money from tourism. Dubai does not simply sell hotel rooms, it sells access to a deeply integrated commercial ecosystem. Let us follow the typical financial footprint of a visiting family over a standard 72-hour period. The transaction sequence begins the moment they land at the airport. They pay for a taxi to their resort, immediately injecting cash into the local transit system. They check into their premium accommodation, securing a high-yield nightly rate for the property owner. By evening, they are dining at a waterfront restaurant, paying a premium for both the food and the curated atmosphere. The next morning involves purchasing tickets for high-altitude observation decks or sprawling indoor ski slopes. The afternoon is spent inside massive retail complexes, transferring foreign capital into the local retail sector. They might book an evening desert excursion, supporting specialized tour operators and independent drivers. Before their departure, they utilize hotel spa services and purchase luxury goods at the duty-free terminals. Now, imagine that entire sequence of wealth generation being completely wiped out in a single moment. When a traveler presses the cancel button on their smartphone, all of those interconnected businesses lose their anticipated income simultaneously. A tourist creates revenue through multiple distinct layers of the local economy. Aviation, hospitality, transportation, food and beverage, retail, entertainment, and ultimately real estate are all linked to that single arrival. If you are a hotel owner managing a massive property, you must ask yourself a very difficult question. What is more dangerous to your business survival? Is it a physically damaged room that needs repairs, or a perfectly pristine, fully staffed room that absolutely no one wants to book? This is precisely the moment when a crisis in the skies evolves into a crisis in the consumer consciousness. Tourists do not actually need to believe that a destination is directly dangerous to change their travel plans. They only need to feel a lingering sense of logistical uncertainty. Travelers require absolute confidence that their outbound flight will depart on time, that their return journey will not be interrupted, and that their travel insurance will actually cover unforeseen delays. They need to know that they will not be stranded away from their jobs and their homes. We can look at this through two parallel narratives. The first family decides to keep their scheduled trip, accepting the elevated risk, and perhaps purchasing more expensive, fully flexible tickets. The second family watches the same exact evening news broadcast, but arrives at a very different conclusion. They decide to redirect their vacation budget towards Singapore, Spain, or perhaps a domestic destination closer to home. This second family will never actually appear in the official cancellation statistics of the city. Because they never finalize their booking, they remain entirely invisible to the data trackers. They represent a massive shadow loss of potential revenue. This might be the most difficult type of economic damage to measure accurately. The airport authorities can easily count the number of people who failed to show up for a scheduled flight, but absolutely no one can accurately count the number of people who briefly considered visiting, felt a sudden wave of geopolitical anxiety, and quietly closed their internet browser. When millions of these microscopic individual decisions happen simultaneously around the globe, the cumulative impact becomes staggering. The financial consequences do not just stop at the arrival gates. They spread outward, fundamentally altering the financial reality of every neighborhood in the city. The domino effect moves rapidly through the urban landscape, hitting different sectors with varying degrees of severity. We must examine the hospitality sector first. A luxury hotel operates with incredibly high fixed costs, regardless of whether the building is full or empty. A vacant room tonight cannot be placed into a warehouse and sold tomorrow. That specific unit of time and potential revenue is lost permanently. Meanwhile, the massive costs associated with industrial cooling, staffing, and facility maintenance continue to drain cash reserves every single hour. Next, the pressure shifts to the restaurant and retail sectors. Commercial rent in prime districts remains exceptionally high, and staff payrolls must be met consistently. When foot traffic diminishes, the daily volume of retail receipts plummets, placing immediate stress on cash flow margins. The meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions sector faces an even darker reality. corporate travelers typically spend significantly more money per day than leisure tourists. When a multinational corporation decides to postpone a major industry conference due to regional instability, the city loses thousands of premium room bookings, luxury transport contracts, and massive catering orders in one swift blow. The short-term rental market and the broader real estate sector are also deeply exposed. Property investors who purchased luxury apartments based on the promise of high daily rental yields suddenly find their booking calendars alarmingly empty. This forces them to lower their rates, which compresses their profit margins and ultimately makes future real estate investments look far less attractive. Finally, the labor force absorbs the ultimate shock. Service workers face reduced hours, diminished gratuities, and a sudden freeze in new hiring. It is crucial to clarify that the estimated damages reported across the broader Middle East cannot be entirely attributed to Dubai alone. However, the underlying mechanism remains identical. The story seems remarkably simple at first glance. Geopolitical tension reduces flight capacity, and reduced flight capacity destroys local revenue. But just as the economic pressure reaches a critical threshold, the entire system suddenly begins to reverse its downward trajectory. Despite the severity of the initial shock, the city possesses undeniable systemic advantages that cannot be ignored. Dubai operates one of the most sophisticated and highly scaled aviation hubs on the planet. Its long-haul network is incredibly vast, granting it the unique ability to shift capacity and reroute aircraft with remarkable efficiency. The local hospitality ecosystem is fully matured, and global travel demand has historically proven to be deeply resilient. Furthermore, the ultra-high net worth market segment often demonstrates a much higher tolerance for both elevated ticket prices and regional risk. As the immediate airspace restrictions begin to ease, the visual transformation is striking. Heavy aircraft begin launching from the runways once again. The digital departure boards transition from a sea of red cancellations back to a comforting wall of green. The massive terminal concourses slowly fill with the familiar hum of international transit passengers. Hotel staff return to their stations, ready to process incoming arrivals. Airlines across the Gulf region release statements projecting immense confidence in their long-term operational strategies. If one were to strictly analyze the updated flight schedules and the sheer volume of aircraft movement, it would be very easy to conclude that the city has completely weathered the storm. The visual evidence strongly suggests a return to absolute normalcy. But a flight schedule only proves that a sophisticated machine has the technical clearance to operate. It does not measure the human desire to actually board that machine. This reveals the massive gap between a purely technical recovery and a genuine restoration of consumer confidence. To understand why a crowded airport does not equal a fully healed economy, we must break down the recovery process into three distinct tiers. Tier 1 is the technical recovery. This is the phase where airspace is officially reopened for commercial navigation. Flight routes are actively re-established, and airlines successfully reposition their aircraft and crew members to resume scheduled operations. Dubai has almost absolute control over this specific tier, utilizing its massive infrastructure to restart the physical movement of metal. Tier 2 is the commercial recovery. This occurs when airlines are able to actually sell enough seats to achieve profitability on those reinstated routes. It is the phase where hotel occupancy rates begin to climb, and properties are able to defend their average daily rates without resorting to desperate discounting. The city has significant influence here, employing aggressive marketing campaigns and strategic pricing to stimulate demand. However, Tier 3 is the psychological recovery, and this is where the true crisis resides. Psychological recovery requires a family in Europe to feel entirely comfortable booking a vacation 6 months in advance. It requires a global corporation to confidently commit millions of dollars to host an event in the city without fearing a sudden cancellation. It requires the average tourist to implicitly trust that their journey home will not be shattered by a sudden geopolitical escalation. This third tier does not happen on a runway or inside a hotel lobby. It happens entirely within the minds of consumers living on different continents. The city controls the first tier, influences the second, but is largely at the mercy of the third. Would you confidently pay for a non-refundable luxury vacation 6 months from now if you knew a regional conflict could shut down your route home in a matter of hours? Therefore, the disruption of 2026 is not merely a threat to a single financial quarter, it is a direct threat to the psychological positioning of the city on the global map of safe havens. This psychological shift introduces three specific levels of long-term economic damage. The first level is the immediate cancellation of existing itineraries, which we have already witnessed. The second level is a severe delay in future bookings, where tourists wait until the absolute last minute to commit their funds, making it impossible for hotels to forecast their seasonal revenues. The third and most dangerous level is a fundamental change in how the global consumer categorizes the destination. For decades, Dubai has aggressively marketed itself as the ultimate reliable safe haven. Now, it faces the terrifying prospect of being downgraded in the minds of travelers. Instead of being a guaranteed destination, it becomes a place that is still attractive, but requires constant monitoring of the news cycle. It becomes a destination where travelers feel compelled to purchase expensive, flexible tickets, just in case they need to flee. It transitions from being a primary choice to being a destination that requires a solid backup plan. In the highly competitive global tourism market, Dubai does not need to become a dangerous place to lose billions of dollars. It simply needs to lose a micro-comparison in the mind of a single tourist. It might lose out to a competing aviation hub that feels just a fraction more stable. It might lose to a luxury resort destination that is located geographically closer to the primary source markets of Europe or Asia. In the tourism industry, the most dangerous competitor is not always the city with the tallest buildings or the most luxurious shopping malls. The most dangerous competitor is the destination that requires the customer to think the least before handing over their credit card. The friction of anxiety is the enemy of revenue. Yet, completely writing off the future of this economic powerhouse would be a massive analytical mistake. We must critically examine the strongest counterarguments to this narrative of vulnerability. Dubai possesses a global aviation network that is virtually impossible to replace in the short term. The economic model is not solely dependent on leisure tourists seeking sunshine and beaches. The city is sustained by a complex mixture of transit passengers, expatriates visiting families, and aggressive corporate business development. Each of these demographics possesses entirely different motivations and risk tolerances. The hospitality and service ecosystem has reached a scale where it can absorb massive financial shocks that would completely destroy smaller economies. When airspace stabilizes, the sheer gravitational pull of the city's infrastructure guarantees a return of airline capacity. Furthermore, the ultra-luxury consumer segment often demonstrates remarkable immunity to both localized inflation and geopolitical friction. It is entirely fair to state that Dubai is arguably one of the best-equipped cities on Earth to endure this specific type of macroeconomic shock. It has the capital reserves, the political will, and the infrastructure to fight back against the disruption. But a high capacity for enduring pain does not equal total immunity from the consequences. When a system is built to accommodate nearly 20 million visitors, every single day that it operates below optimal capacity translates into a staggering bleed of capital. The fundamental question is no longer whether the city will completely collapse. The precise question we must ask is how long it will take, how much capital it will burn, and what fundamental aspects of its business model must change in order to fully recover. The remainder of 2026 could unfold in three vastly different directions. The first possibility is the scenario of a rapid recovery. In this outcome, regional tensions de-escalate quickly, allowing the airspace to stabilize permanently. Flight schedules are aggressively restored, and the upcoming peak winter season successfully compensates for the massive revenue losses of the spring. The financial damage remains strictly contained within a few isolated months, and the city resumes its historical growth trajectory. The second possibility is a highly uneven and fragmented recovery. Here, high-net-worth individuals and travelers visiting relatives return almost immediately. However, families planning major holidays and tourists who usually book months in advance remain highly cautious. The lucrative corporate events sector, short-term rental investors, and small independent businesses continue to suffer under immense financial pressure for a much longer period. In this scenario, the airport statistics recover much faster than the actual revenue flowing through the city streets. The third possibility is the establishment of a new normal, defined by chronic uncertainty. geopolitical disruptions become a recurring theme, forcing travelers to permanently alter their behavior. Booking windows shrink drastically, average trip durations become shorter, and the demand for fully refundable tickets becomes the industry standard. Consequently, the city is forced to spend significantly more capital on promotional discounts, safety assurances, and continuous crisis management public relations. It is crucial to note that these are potential scenarios based on current industry forecasts, not absolute guarantees of the future. Regardless of which specific scenario becomes reality, this geopolitical shock has successfully exposed a fundamental truth about the city's economic foundation. If we look back at the digital departure boards that were bleeding red with cancellations just months ago, we can see that they have largely returned to their normal state. The aircraft are moving, the runways are active, and the physical infrastructure remains completely untouched by the chaos of the broader region. Dubai has dedicated several decades and hundreds of billions of dollars to constructing the ultimate global destination. It has built the largest airport terminals, launched the most ambitious airlines, and engineered architectural marvels designed specifically to force the world to look toward the desert. It has engineered an environment of absolute physical perfection, but the most valuable asset in the entire tourism industry is not constructed from structural steel, reinforced concrete, or imported reflective glass. The ultimate asset is the quiet, invisible trust that a planned journey will actually happen exactly as promised. It is the psychological comfort of knowing that the logistical chain will not break. The city has proven beyond any doubt that it has the operational power to reopen the skies above it. The defining question for the future of its economy is whether it can successfully convince the rest of the world that those skies will remain open. This documentary analysis is based strictly on publicly available information, official tourism statistics, aviation data, and industry reporting available at the time of production. Economic conditions, tourism trends, and geopolitical realities are highly dynamic and subject to rapid change. Forecasts and scenario estimates presented in this video are analytical projections, not absolute guarantees of future outcomes. This content is designed for educational and informational purposes regarding macroeconomic systems and is not intended as personalized financial, investment, or travel advice. Would you still feel completely confident booking a non-refundable trip to the region 6 months in advance? Or has the recent geopolitical uncertainty permanently changed how you view the stability of the city? Share your perspective on the travel risks in the comments below. If you appreciate investigative documentaries that look past the marketing brochures and examine the real economic mechanisms driving our world, make sure to subscribe to the channel.